When you realize this, everything changes. The world is not divided by those who work hard and those who are lazy, but by an invisible chasm of understanding that begins in the very architecture of the home. Imagine a young boy standing at the crossroads of two destinies, listening to the echoes of two different voices, each offering a blueprint for a life he has yet to lead. One voice is steady, educated, and grounded in the traditional virtues of hard work and academic excellence. The other is daring, unconventional, and speaks a language of money that is never taught in the hallowed halls of a university. This is the origin of a psychological revolution that would eventually shake the foundations of modern financial thought. The journey begins in 1950s Hawaii, where a 9-year-old Robert and his best friend Mike find themselves feeling the sting of exclusion. They are the poor kids in a school of the wealthy, watching as their peers arrive in new cars and talk of summer vacations at private beach houses. It is a moment of profound realization. The gap between them and the rich is not just a matter of luck, but a matter of a secret knowledge that they do not yet possess. Driven by a raw, burning curiosity, they ask the boy's father, a man with a PhD and a prestigious government job, how to make money. His answer is the standard mantra of the masses: go to school, get good grades, and find a secure job. It is a safe path, a path of honor. But it is a path that leads to a lifetime of trading time for a paycheck, hungry for a different truth. The boys turn to Mike's father, a man who would become known to the world as the rich dad. He was not yet a millionaire, but he possessed a mind that functioned like a predatory machine in the world of commerce. He agreed to teach them, but not through lectures or textbooks. He plunged them into the cold water of reality. Their first lesson was grueling, working for 3 hours every Saturday morning at one of his convenience stores, dusting cans of canned milk for a measly 10 cents an hour. The boredom was suffocating, the pay insulting. The young boy felt the rising tide of resentment, the same resentment that billions of workers feel every Monday morning as they drag themselves to a job they despise for a salary that barely covers the rent. When the boy finally confronted the rich dad, ready to quit and accusing him of exploitation, the man simply smiled. He had achieved his goal. He had allowed the boy to feel the rat race firsthand. He explained that most people spend their lives living in the grip of two powerful emotions, fear and greed. Fear of not having enough money drives them to work harder. And once they get that paycheck, greed, or desire, leads them to think of all the beautiful things they can buy. This creates a cycle of working for money that they then spend on things that take more money out of their pockets. The analysis of this formative trauma reveals a terrifying psychological truth about the global workforce. Most individuals are not trapped by their bosses or their lack of education, but by their own emotional illiteracy. They react to the fear of poverty by working harder at a job, never stopping to ask if the job is actually the solution. They are like a donkey pulling a cart while the owner holds a carrot just out of reach. The poor dad, despite his high intellect and social standing, was a victim of this cycle. He viewed money as a stressful necessity to be managed, while the rich dad viewed it as a tool to be mastered. The lesson learned is that if you cannot master your emotions of fear and desire, you will be a high-priced slave for the rest of your life. Success starts with the realization that money is an illusion, a social construct that most people work for because they don't understand how to make it work for them. The boys learned that to be rich, they had to stop thinking like employees who look for a paycheck and start thinking like owners who look for opportunities. As the years passed, the lessons grew more complex, moving from the emotional to the structural. The rich dad introduced a concept so deceptively simple that most people dismiss it. Yet it is the single most important distinction in the history of wealth, the difference between an asset and a liability. To the world, a house is an asset. To the rich dad, if it takes money out of your pocket, it is a liability. He drew simple diagrams to show the flow of cash. A liability is something that generates an expense, while an asset is something that generates income. The poor dad spent his life accumulating liabilities that he thought were assets: a bigger house, a faster car, a more expensive lifestyle, all of which required more of his labor to maintain. He was caught in a cash flow nightmare where every raise in salary was immediately swallowed by a raise in expenses. This is the financial rat race in its purest form. The narrative of the book intensifies as we watch the divergent paths of the two fathers. The poor dad, burdened by the belief that the government or his employer should take care of him, suffered as his taxes rose and his purchasing power fell. He believed in the entitlement of the educated. Meanwhile, the rich dad was building a column of assets. He bought small houses and apartment buildings, not to live in them, but to harvest the rent. He invested in stocks and businesses. He understood that wealth is measured not by how much money you make, but by how much money you keep and how long that money works for you. He taught the boys that financial literacy is the ability to read numbers and understand the story they tell. If you cannot read the story of money, you are at the mercy of those who can. The analysis here shifts to the concept of mind your own business. Most people spend their lives working in someone else's business and making someone else rich. The chef works for the restaurant owner, the accountant works for the firm, the clerk works for the corporation. Kiyosaki argues that your profession is what you do for 40 hours a week to pay the bills, but your business is your asset column. The secret to wealth is to keep your daytime job but to start buying real assets, not liabilities or personal effects that have no real value once you take them home. This requires a shift in identity. You must stop seeing yourself as a laborer and start seeing yourself as an investor. The tragedy of the middle class is that they buy luxuries first, using their own sweat and blood to pay for them, whereas the rich buy luxuries last, using the income generated by their assets. The storytelling takes a dramatic turn when the rich dad reveals the power of the corporation. This is the great secret of the rich. To the average worker, a corporation is a faceless entity. But to the wealthy, it is a legal vehicle that allows them to play by a different set of rules. A corporation earns money, spends everything it can, and is only taxed on what is left. An individual earns money, is taxed immediately, and then tries to live on what is left. This distinction alone creates a massive divergence in wealth over time. The poor dad viewed taxes as a duty to be paid, while the rich dad viewed them as a puzzle to be solved. He used the law to his advantage, not by breaking it, but by understanding it better than the people who wrote it. This leads us into the heart of financial intelligence, which Kiyosaki defines as the combination of 4 skills: accounting, the ability to read numbers; investing, the science of money making money; understanding markets, the science of supply and demand; and the law, understanding tax advantages and protection. Most people are one skill away from great wealth. They are brilliant at their trade but ignorant of how to protect their earnings. They are like a great athlete who doesn't know the rules of the game they are playing. The analysis of this stage of the book suggests that the greatest asset we have is our mind. If trained well, it can create enormous wealth in what seems like an instant. In the information age, money is not real, it is an agreement. Those who can create new agreements and see the patterns in the chaos are the ones who will inherit the earth. The narrative then follows Robert into adulthood, where he begins to apply these lessons in the high-stakes world of real estate and business. He recounts the story of his first investment, a small condo in Hawaii. He didn't have the money, so he found a way to create the deal using a small down payment and the power of leverage. He felt the same fear his father felt, the fear of losing everything, the fear of being wrong. But he remembered the rich dad's advice: failure is part of the process of success. People who avoid failure also avoid success. He began to see the world as a giant game of Monopoly, where the goal is to trade 4 greenhouses for 1 red hotel. He watched as his poor dad struggled with the politics of his job, eventually being pushed out of his position and left with a pension that was a fraction of what he needed. It was a heartbreaking realization of the fragility of the secure job myth. The tension in the story reaches its peak when Robert describes the 5 obstacles that prevent even financially literate people from becoming wealthy: fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance. Fear is the most common. The fear of losing money is so great that it outweighs the thrill of being rich. Cynicism is the Chicken Little syndrome, the constant worry that the sky is falling, which prevents people from taking action when opportunities arise. Laziness, often disguised as being busy, prevents people from tending to their wealth. Bad habits, like paying everyone else before paying yourself, drain the asset column. And arrogance is ego plus ignorance. The analysis of these obstacles provides a mirror for the reader. It forces a confrontation with the psychological barriers that keep us small. The lesson is that wealth is 90% psychological and only 10% technical. If you can control your internal world, the external world will follow. The first part of this epic transformation concludes with the young man standing between his two fathers, realizing that his choice of which voice to follow will determine not just his bank account, but the very quality of his life. He chooses the path of the rich dad, a path of constant learning, calculated risk, and the pursuit of freedom. He understands that the rat race is not an external reality, but a mental trap. The stage is set for a deeper exploration of how to build an empire from nothing, how to find deals that others miss, and how to ultimately escape the gravitational pull of the 9-to-5 world. The boy who dusted cans for 10 cents an hour is gone. In his place is an architect of his own destiny, ready to prove that the truth has, indeed, been right in front of him all along. The transition from a student of theory to a practitioner of power is where the narrative of financial liberation truly begins to bleed into reality. Robert's path was not paved with easy victories, but with the grit of a man who understood that his brain was his most potent asset. He describes a world where the majority of people are paralyzed by a poverty consciousness, a mental fog that makes them blind to the gold mines sitting at their very feet. While the masses were waiting for the economy to improve or for their bosses to grant them a raise, Robert was out in the streets of a depressed real estate market, looking for the blood in the streets that the rich dad always said was the signal for opportunity. He recounts the intense psychological pressure of buying his first few properties during a period of high interest rates and economic uncertainty. His poor dad looked on with genuine concern, seeing only the risk of debt and the possibility of ruin. To the educated man, debt was a dirty word, a weight to be avoided at all costs. But to the man trained by the rich dad, debt was a tool, a lever that could move mountains if used with the precision of a surgeon. The analysis of this period in the story highlights a crucial lesson: the difference between good debt and bad debt. Bad debt is the money you borrow to buy things that lose value, like a television or a luxury car, where you are the one responsible for the payments. Good debt is money borrowed to acquire assets where someone else, like a tenant, pays off the loan for you, leaving you with the equity and the cash flow. The tragedy of the modern world is that most people are drowning in bad debt because they were never taught how to use the banking system to their advantage. They are the prey, and the financially literate are the predators. Robert learned that in every crisis, there is a hidden fortune. He began buying distressed properties from the courthouse steps, using a small amount of money to control a large amount of value. This wasn't just about real estate, it was about the velocity of money, the ability to move capital from one investment to another, growing it exponentially while the poor dad sat at home, diligently saving pennies in a bank account where inflation was slowly devouring his life savings. As the narrative of his success grows, we see the application of the rich dad's most controversial lesson: work to learn, don't work to earn. Robert recounts his decision to join the Xerox Corporation, not because he wanted to be a salesperson, but because he was terrified of rejection. He knew that to be successful in business, he had to master the art of selling. He spent years at Xerox, enduring the soul-crushing no's of prospective clients, until he became one of the top salespeople in the company. He was working for free in terms of his long-term goals, using the company's training and resources to build the skills he would need for his own empire. The analysis here is a direct assault on the traditional career path. Most people seek a job for the salary and the benefits, but the truly successful seek a job for the skills it will teach them. They understand that security is a myth sold to the fearful, while skills are the only true security in an ever-changing world. The lesson is that you should look for a job for what you will become by doing it, rather than what you will get for doing it. This philosophy led Robert into the world of international trade and manufacturing, where he faced his first massive failure, the collapse of his nylon and Velcro wallet business. It was a devastating blow that left him nearly bankrupt and deeply humbled. In this dark hour, the voices of his two fathers echoed in his mind. The poor dad would have seen this as a sign to give up and return to a safe job. But the rich dad saw it as a tuition payment to the greatest school in the world, the school of experience. He taught Robert that a winner isn't someone who never loses, but someone who never quits when they do lose. Failure is the furnace that burns away the dross of arrogance and leaves behind the tempered steel of wisdom. This segment of the story is a visceral reminder that the path to wealth is not a straight line, but a series of peaks and valleys. The analysis reveals that the difference between the rich and the poor is often how they handle failure. To the poor, failure is a permanent label; to the rich, it is a temporary condition and a necessary prerequisite for the next big win. The storytelling shifts to the mechanics of the deal. Robert explains how he and Mike would spend their weekends looking for problems to solve. To the rich dad, a problem was simply an opportunity in disguise. If a building was run down and the owner was tired of managing it, that was a problem that could be solved with a creative offer. If a business was struggling because of poor management, that was a problem that could be solved with new leadership. The lesson learned is that wealth flows to those who solve problems for others. Money is the byproduct of value creation. The poor dad focused on his own needs, his need for a paycheck, his need for a pension, while the rich dad focused on the needs of the market. By shifting his focus from how can I get more money, to how can I solve more problems, Robert unlocked a level of abundance that his educated father could never fathom. This period also illustrates the power of specialized knowledge. Robert didn't just study real estate, he studied tax law, contract law, and the psychology of negotiation. He realized that the game of money is played on a field of rules, and most people don't even know there is a rule book. He used 1,031 exchanges to defer taxes on his real estate gains, allowing his wealth to compound at a rate that would be impossible for an ordinary taxpayer. The analysis here is profound. The system is designed by the rich. For the rich, it is not unfair, it is simply a different game. If you choose to play the game of the employee, you will be taxed heavily. If you choose to play the game of the investor, you will be incentivized with tax breaks and government support. The moral of the story is not to complain about the system, but to learn the rules so well that you can win within them. The narrative reaches a psychological crescendo as Robert discusses the power of giving. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive lesson from the rich dad. He believed that if you want something, you must first give it. If you want money, you must give money. If you want sales, you must help someone else sell. This is the law of reciprocity in action. The poor dad always said, "I'll give when I have extra." But he never had extra. The rich dad gave even when he had little, trusting that the universe would return it tenfold. This analysis suggests that a scarcity mindset, the belief that there isn't enough to go around, is the primary cause of poverty. By giving, you signal to your own subconscious and to the world that you are a person of abundance. You move from a state of need to a state of overflow. This spiritual alignment is the secret ingredient that makes the technical strategies work. The story then follows Robert and his wife, Kim, as they embark on a period of intense struggle. At one point living out of their car to keep their dream of financial independence alive. They were homeless but not hopeless. They refused to get jobs because they knew that the moment they accepted a paycheck, the trap would snap shut again. They stayed focused on their asset column, building their business and investing every spare dollar into cash-flowing assets. This is the marshmallow test of adult life, the ability to delay gratification today for a massive reward tomorrow. The analysis of their sacrifice reveals the true price of freedom. It isn't free. It costs the comfort of the present and the approval of society. People laughed at them. Their families worried about them. But they were following a map that only they could see. The tension breaks when the income from their assets finally surpasses their expenses. They have reached escape velocity. They are no longer required to work. They are rich by the only definition that matters. They have their time back. The story of the two fathers concludes with a poignant contrast. The poor dad, despite his years of service and his high level of education, died with regrets and unpaid bills. The rich dad died leaving an empire to his children and a legacy of empowerment to the world. Robert realized that he didn't just inherit money, he inherited a way of seeing. He understood that the greatest gift the rich dad gave him wasn't a tip on a stock, but a lens through which to view the world. a lens that transformed every obstacle into a stepping stone and every dollar into a soldier in his private army. As this part of the narrative draws to a close, we see Robert standing as a bridge between these two worlds. He has lived the life of the employee and the life of the investor. He has felt the fear of the poor and the confidence of the wealthy. The stage is set for the final revelation, that the rich dad philosophy is not just about personal wealth, but about a fundamental shift in how humanity relates to the concept of work and value. The final part will reveal the ultimate core message, the why behind the how and the heavy, undeniable truth that determines who remains in the rat race and who finally steps out into the sunlight of true independence. The final realization of this journey is the understanding that financial freedom is not a bank balance, but the ultimate form of self-sovereignty. As Robert looks back at the life of his poor dad, he sees a man who was trapped not by his lack of talent, but by his own definitions. The educated man believed that working for the man was his only option, and as a result, the man owned his time, his energy, and his future. The rich dad, conversely, viewed the world as a limitless field of opportunities where money was merely a byproduct of thinking differently. The narrative reaches its peak when Robert describes the moment he and his wife, Kim, finally realized they would never have to work for a paycheck again. It wasn't the day they bought a mansion or a sports car, it was the day their monthly passive income from small rental properties and investments exceeded their monthly expenses. At that moment, the chains of the rat race fell away. They had achieved the most precious commodity in the human experience, the power to choose how to spend their one and only life. The analysis of this final stage of the book reveals a profound psychological shift. Most people believe that to get rich, they need a higher salary. But the story of the poor dad proves that a higher salary often leads to higher taxes and higher debt, a more gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. The core lesson is that wealth is not found in the income column of a financial statement, but in the asset column. The rich focus on building a machine that produces money, while the poor focus on being the machine themselves. This is the difference between owning your life and being a part of someone else's balance sheet. The book challenges the very foundation of modern education, suggesting that we are being trained to be good employees rather than good masters of capital. We are taught to be obedient, to follow rules, and to seek security. Yet in a world of rapid change, the only true security is the ability to create, manage, and grow assets. The storytelling concludes by examining the legacy of the two fathers. The poor dad represents the tragic archetype of the industrial age, a man who followed all the rules, worked hard, and still ended up struggling because the rules of the game changed while he was playing it. The rich dad represents the new archetype of the information age, a man who understands that his greatest asset is his ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Robert realized that the most important thing his rich dad taught him was not how to buy a house or a stock, but how to master his own mind. He learned to look at a no and see a not yet. He learned to look at a crisis and see a sale. He learned that the only thing standing between an individual and their dreams is the story they tell themselves about what is possible. The core message of Rich Dad Poor Dad is that financial survival is no longer enough. In the modern world, financial literacy is a mandatory requirement for freedom. The book intends to convey that you must stop working for money and start making money work for you by understanding the difference between assets and liabilities, mastering the legal and tax advantages of the rich, and overcoming the psychological barriers of fear and cynicism. It is a call to take back control of your financial destiny by becoming the architect of your own asset column. The truth is that you are either a master of money or its slave. There is no middle ground.